Hey, good morning. Jamie here. Happy Monday. We get another week for building better lives and careers. So this week, what I'm going to share with you is a basic intro to sales and influence. So the reason sales and influence is so important is because I truly believe sales, negotiation, and influence are the most valuable soft skills that we can develop in our lives. And even some people would say, no, leadership is the most important. Well, every single leader must know how to sell, must know how to influence, and must be able to negotiate, whether it's in a personal or a professional setting. So that's what we're going to focus on. And so what I'm going to share with you are several basic principles that when we understand these principles, it will naturally affect and begin to change how we think about these types of conversations. And then also what I want to share with you is a basic structure that you can follow in influencing somebody. And once you have this structure in your mind, you'll know how to ask questions, how to lead the conversation in a way that will eventually influence the other person's thoughts and their perspective ultimately on whatever the situation is, whether that's a professional situation or even in a personal situation. So the other thing I want to share quickly in the intro is a lot of people believe that they call influence sometimes manipulation. And I want to kind of quickly debunk that. Manipulation is only bad if it's used in a bad way. Oftentimes we have to manipulate people for good reasons, whether that's for health reasons. Think of what doctors have to do. Doctors have to manipulate patients to change their behavior, to eat properly, to exercise, to do things that are gonna save them. And so going into this, I want you to take all of your preconceived judgments or ideas about sales or influence or negotiation or manipulation or whatever it is that you want to call it and throw it out the window, because how I want you to see sales, negotiation, and influence is they're tools. If you give someone a hammer and they're a bad person, they're going to use that hammer for very bad things. If you have a good person and you give them a hammer, they're going to use it for good reasons. So this is nothing more than a tool, and it's something that when we have the right tool and we have good moral judgment and we have opportunities to be able to use this tool for excellent outcomes, that's where we can begin to change not only our own lives, but all the lives of the people around us, and especially the people that we work with in our families, our friends, and in our community. So with that, let's get into it. All right, so in this first part, what I want to break down are 4 principles of human nature that are massively influential in the sales, influence, and the negotiation space. So I know that I've talked about pain and pleasure in several other videos, but I want to be able to condense these and still talk about these for today's video. So the first one that we have to understand pain and pleasure in order to motivate ourselves, but also to motivate other people. So every decision that we make as people, as humans, whether it's in our personal lives, our professional lives, health, eating, our work, like getting things done on time, waking up on time, everything that we do, every habit that we have is driven by pain and pleasure. So in a relationship, maybe you go and do things, you go out of your way for someone, and you do that because you know that it's gonna, one, make you feel good, but it's gonna make the other person happy. Well, that's driven by pleasure. Or maybe you're doing it because you know that if I don't do this thing, well, something bad's going to happen. And that's going to be a bunch of pain. And so in the workplace, let's say you have a deadline coming up. Well, that deadline is going to create a little bit of pain because you know in your mind, if I don't get this thing done by X deadline, bad things are going to happen to me, or the team or the company or whatever. So it's driven by pain. And you also know that, well, if I do get in on time and I do a phenomenal job, well, the pleasure, the upside is going to be fantastic. So you're motivated both by the pain of what if, if this does not happen in this way, bad, and if it's something good does happen. So it's kind of like you're getting pushed from the back by pain and you're getting pulled forward by the pleasure. And that is when you can massively motivate yourself and as well as other people. Is the pain is pushing them. So view this as a person. They need to know what the pain is that is motivating them from behind, but then at the same time, they need to be pulled. Well, don't want the arrow going that way. They need to be pulled this way by pleasure. Pain and pleasure. And they have to be able to see both sides. Because sometimes a lot of the times what we do is we try to motivate people with only pleasure. Well, sometimes someone needs a swift kick to the arse. They need to know what the pain is. A lot of people are only motivated by pain. And so we need to understand that we, all of us individually, as well as everyone else that we interact with, are motivated differently. Some people are primarily motivated, think of it like 80-20. Some people are primarily motivated by pleasure. Other people are primarily motivated by pain. And every person that you're trying to influence, you first need to know, is this person primarily motivated by pain or pleasure? And you can figure that out through asking questions. Hey, when you think about the future, what do you think about? Someone who's motivated by pleasure is going to tell you about dreams, ambitions, things they want to do. And people who are motivated by pain are going to say, well, I want to be able to survive. I want to make sure I have enough money. And immediately they're talking about not being affected by downsides. So that's one way that you can figure out how is someone motivated in terms of the pain and pleasure. Now, the second part is self-interest. So this is where a lot of people go wrong in influence or sales or negotiation is they try to appeal to the other person's good-hearted nature or their gratitude or their sympathy or their appreciation or all of these positive aspects of personal qualities, if you will. Now, that's not a bad or a good thing. It's just it's least effective, or it's less effective compared to appealing to someone's self-interest. Now, the reason this is so important is self-interest is this. It's pain and pleasure. It is understanding that person's world. If you're just saying, I want you to do this because I told you to do this, that has nothing to do with that person's self-interest. They feel controlled, they feel micromanaged, they feel kind of dominated by whoever that person is, whether it's in a professional or a personal setting. So when we want to influence somebody or get someone to do something, we do not want to force someone to do something, because what it does is they might do it in the short term. And this is really what happens is you have short-term compliance. And this is what a lot of companies, a lot of managers do wrong. They just direct orders. But the problem with that is short-term compliance. So there's complying. But what happens is that keeps happening. And it builds, and it builds, and it builds, and it builds, and it builds until this is all, what it does is it builds resentment. Because this person, whoever it is, they feel like I have no say. I'm being told what to do consistently over and over and over and over and over again. And they don't feel like it's their idea or their desire to do these things. They don't see their own pain and pleasure being wrapped into this. The only thing that they see is the pain of not doing what this person told them to do. Well, it gets tiring. It's exhausting to live your entire life constantly just in a state of fear of, if I don't do this thing, then bad things are going to happen. So it builds resentment over the long term until eventually there's a break. And that break is in a relationship. It could be in a professional setting, a workplace setting. It could be on a team. It could be with a client. It could be with a coworker, anybody. But this is what happens with a lot of a lot of relationships that people have in their lives, when they don't understand that in order to influence somebody to do something, you don't want to force them. Instead, you want to understand and influence their pain and pleasure through self-interest, their perspective of the world, and then that way you can avoid that bad situation. You do not want that to happen. Now, as a simple example, self-interest. Actually, no, I'll save that example for the structure in the second part of this video. So now we have the third principle. Hua. So this stands for heard, understood, acknowledged, and appreciated. So again, HUAA. Heard, people want to feel. We all want to feel. Heard, understood, acknowledged, and appreciated. Now, I'll give a really quick example here of where even if the other person doesn't get their way, if you make that other person feel heard, understood, acknowledged, and appreciated, they're still going to walk away feeling good about whatever that interaction was. So let's say you're a manager and you have a team of 6 people. Or even larger. Let's say you're a senior leader and you have all of these teams. It doesn't matter whatever size of the influence situation is. So if you have someone who presents an idea, and let's say you're the leader and you completely disagree with the idea. Oh, stupid idea, buddy. And you just are not going to have it. A lot of people just say no and they shut it down. Well, how does that person feel? Probably a little repulsed, maybe even offended, degraded. Maybe they feel embarrassed because they just got shut down and told no with no explanation in front of everyone else. They're going to feel stupid. And so there's a lot of managers and a lot of leaders who aren't thinking from the other person's perspective about how does that other person feel. Now, a lot of people say, well, they need thick skin, and that's what business is. Business is emotion. Business is working and understanding and influencing people. So a way that a leader could significantly handle that situation better is, let's say that person presents the idea. That leader, the manager, could say, okay, so interesting. So you said no. Let me understand why. Can you walk me through your thoughts on why you presented that idea? Well, then that person is going to share their thoughts here. So the herd is you as the leader acknowledging, okay, you said no. Why? Explain it. Well, then they're going to be able to explain themselves understood so that you can actually understand them, or they feel that you understand them. And then what you want to do is you want to acknowledge the fact that they shared their thoughts, their opinions, and say, hey, okay, personally, I disagree. I think that this other reason could be the better route that we take because blah, 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 and then give your own reasons. I just want to say thank you for being willing to share your thoughts. Well, one, you acknowledge the fact that they did share their thoughts and you acknowledge their idea, and they also feel appreciated because you thank them for sharing their thoughts. Well, that person, even though you said no and you decide to do something else, they still feel good because they're like, wow, that person actually respects me. And that person then, the next time that you have a conversation, is also going to share their thoughts in the future, which a lot of managers, they bring on these new people to the team, and without them knowing it, they're shutting these people down left and right. And then eventually, my team isn't coming up with any ideas. Well, I wonder why. None of them feel comfortable and none of them want to because of how things have gone in the past. So this is super important, and the way that you can do this consistently in order to make other people feel heard, understood, acknowledged, and appreciated is, one, you can only do that through asking questions. You have to ask people questions. If you're not asking questions, they're not going to feel heard, understood, acknowledged, and appreciated. After you ask the question, then you have to actually listen and understand what they say. A lot of people ask a question and that other person's responding, and the only thing this person, you are thinking in your mind is exactly what you're going to respond to shut them down even further. That's not the point. And that's also not going to make them feel understood or acknowledged. And so the last part is what you want to do is paraphrase back to them. So they share their thoughts or ideas, and what you want to do is kind of take their words and change them into your understanding of what it is that they just told you, and then paraphrase it back to them. And the reason you want to do that is that will massively affect this third part. Understood, acknowledged, and appreciated. When you paraphrase back to them, they will know I was listened to, I was understood, and they actually acknowledged everything that I just said. So this is super important. If you want to improve every single relationship in your life, this is crucial. If you can do this to every single person in your life that really you want to have a strong relationship with, this will absolutely transform it. So then the fourth part is questions. So what we do as humans is we have all of our own backgrounds, our own experiences in terms of life, our careers, relationships, money, finances, our spirituality. Like, all of us have this giant warehouse of information in our head. And what we do is we project it onto situations that are similar. And that's the way that our brain works. It works in terms of pattern recognition. And so what we do is when we see a similar situation, we immediately dive into our memory and it's subconscious and immediately begin thinking and projecting onto the situation what we've experienced or thought in the past. Or maybe we learned from something in the past, we're projecting what not to do onto the situation. And so oftentimes in relationships, when there's conflict or battle or people not influencing one and they're just fighting and defending one another, what it is there's a lack of understanding between the two people or the group of people because no one's asking questions. They're just spitting at one another. And so what we need to do is we have to ask and never assume that we actually understand what that other person is thinking, because all of us have different backgrounds, different experiences. And so everybody experiences life differently. So if you have one situation, like let's say this is a situation, the pen right here, you could have 10 people all see this situation and they all think differently. And a perfect example of that is think news stories, where you have these reporters where some crazy event happens and then the reporter goes and interviews all the people around the situation. Hey, Mr. Smith, can you tell us what happened? Oh my God. And then they go off on this crazy tangent. And then they go ask someone else and that person is a completely different story. It could be a different person in the story. That's the effect is just because something happened objectively does not mean that every single person around it who observed it thinks about it in the same way. And what we do not want to do is think that we understand something when at the same time we really don't. So I'll give another example. In relationships, a common cause of problems in relationships is the man or the woman or the man, the woman, whatever the relationship is they think they know what's bothering the other person. And so because they think they know what's bothering the other person, they then start doing something to remedy that. Well, what if the thing that they think is bothering that person is not actually what's bothering them? Instead, it's actually taking the time to sit down together and ask the tough questions. Hey, what's going on? What's happening? A lot of people are afraid of those conflict conversations, but they're not conflict. That's actual communication. Influence can only happen through communication, through asking questions, and actually listening, understanding, and repeating back to the other person to make sure that you understand it. All right, so these 4 principles, if you can begin practicing these in your everyday life, and also another exercise that you can do to practice this is, let's say you're in a work setting. In your work, write someone's name. So let's say you have a sheet of paper, all right, and you could put someone's name here, and what you could do is actually think through, all right, pain. What is motivating this person in terms of pain? What does this person not want to happen in their team, in their life, what is motivating this person in terms of pain? And then what is motivating them in terms of pleasure? This could be a promotion, it could be a bonus, it could be a new opportunity within the company, etc. And then in terms of self-interest, this is going to be their self-interest. So this is self-interest. And then in terms of heard, understood, acknowledged, appreciated, you can begin to think about your last interaction with them. What was my last interaction with this person? Did I ask questions? Did I make them feel heard, understood, acknowledged, and appreciated? And think through your experience or your relationship with that person. It's going to start opening your eyes. All right, so with that, I want to transition into the second part of this video where I'm going to show you a very simple framework and a structure for actually moving someone through an influential or sales type conversation. And once you have this structure in the back of your head, it's going to be very, very helpful for the rest of your life. All right, so I'm very excited to be able to share this with you because I think you're going to find this very applicable and very useful. So I'm going to walk through each of these individual steps, and I know that this might look like a lot, but once you logically understand the flow, actually remembering the specific numbers and what phrase or what section comes after, it will flow naturally because this is understanding human nature. So even just think of this is hua. This is heard, understood, acknowledged, and appreciated. This is understanding someone else's life and their situation. And then in terms of values, pain, and consequences, this is pain. This is understanding what is pushing them from behind, or you need to come up with something and share something that pushes them from behind. And then the third part, the third major part here is pleasure and benefits. This is what's pulling them forward to want to do something. This is the pleasure side. And then finally is being able to make the ask. Ask, ask, ask. Never assume. Make the ask. Because if you don't ask, you cannot assume that they're just going to openly make a decision. A lot of people, I should have put this in the principles. People love options. They're option hunters. That's all people want are options. And that's why so many things go wrong in people's lives is because they don't actually make a decision and commit to something because they just want to keep gathering more options. Options are not our friend. They're actually our enemy because they halt and kill and eliminate action. They destroy decisions. Yes, we need to analyze some options, but what we don't want to do is be paralyzed in our lives because we just keep getting more options. We have to actually take action. And the only way to actually kind of jumpstart somebody into that situation is to ask, because questions control our thoughts. If I were to ask you, what was the color of your first car? What are you thinking about right now? You're probably thinking about the color of your first car. Why? Because I asked the question. You can literally control other people's thoughts, or at least their train of thoughts, and what they're thinking about by asking questions and making a direct ask. Another example, think of it as when you're in a conversation, maybe you're out to dinner sometime, and you're at the table and you're laughing, you're joking, and you're telling a story, and then someone interrupts with a question, or the waiter comes by or something, and then you respond, and then you come back and you're like, I have no idea what I was talking about. Why? Why did we lose our train of thought? Because someone asked a question, controlled our focus, and then when we came back, we completely forgot what was happening. It is extremely powerful when you learn to ask. A lot of people never ask. All right, so the first part, hook. What do we mean by a hook? Remember this forever. You are always an interruption to someone else's life unless you have their attention. So that is the purpose of a hook. It is to get their attention. You are always an interruption in someone else's life unless you have their attention. The only way to capture someone's attention in the very beginning of a conversation is by focusing on their self-interest. If you immediately start talking about yourself or what you care about or everything going on in your world and you're trying to influence this person to make a decision to help you or something or to do something and all you talked about was yourself in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, that person has zoned out yesterday. Like they just don't care. So when you approach somebody to influence them, the very first thing you have to do is open with a question or a statement that immediately aligns with their self-interest, something that they personally care about. It has to be something that they care about. And then that is going to hook their attention. And they're going to actually be engaged in the conversation and listen to what you're saying. A lot of people are because they feel like, oh, I just don't care about this conversation. They'll literally get through. They'll sit there and be like, It's going in one ear and right out the other. They're there physically, but they're mentally just totally zoned out because they don't actually care about the conversation. They've already made up their mind before you've even shared anything with them. So you have to hook their attention. Then the second part is you have to ask questions, listen, and understand. Never assume that you know somebody's life or you know someone's background or you know their situation, ever. Because we are always wrong, always. And so the very first thing you want to do is this is situation. So we need to ask questions to understand their situation. Situation, their thoughts, and really their beliefs. We have to understand the world before we can ever try to influence it. How could you possibly influence somebody if you don't understand where they're coming from? That's like trying to speak Spanish to someone who's speaking Mandarin or speaking English to somebody who's speaking German. Like, if you're talking different languages, you will never influence the person. That's what most people try to do. They literally just start spitting and trying to influence somebody through talking. If you don't understand where they're coming from, you're never, ever, ever going to be able to influence that person unless it's through force, which is like put a gun to someone's head. All right, yeah, now they will listen, but that's totally forced. It's not a self-made decision. So to influence somebody, we have to first ask questions to understand their situation, their thoughts, and their beliefs. And then we need to actually listen and make sure that we truly understand it. Because if we don't understand it, then we're not going to understand what do they actually value. Now, the reason we need to know what people value is they have different weights. So let's say you have value 1, value 2, value 3, value 4, value 5. And if we were to give these a weighted scale, well, maybe their top value, let's say that someone's top value is family. Well, in that case, if you're going to try to influence this person, you need to know that family is their number one concern. So if you're trying to influence somebody, hey, if you were to do this, you're going to make so much money. Well, maybe money is like their fourth value, and it's not even weighted that hard. So let's say on a scale of like 1 to 10, let's say that money for this person is a 3, but family's a 10. You're never going to influence that person talking about money. Maybe it's going to have to be very, very hard. But if that situation is going to compromise their family, well, they will absolutely never make that decision. So you cannot know what someone's value structures are unless you actually understand their life, their situation. What do they care about? And you can only do that through asking questions and listening and understanding. So once we understand their values and how they're weighted, let's just say, for example, that, then once we understand what their values are, then we can begin to ask questions about the pain. What is currently going on? Hey, so I'd love to hear what's currently going on and why are you unhappy? How come? Those types of questions, what you're doing is you're allowing them to express what are they unhappy with? Or what would happen if something doesn't happen? So let's say that you're working on a team with a colleague or a coworker or something like that, and you're on the same team and you have a deadline coming up and you're nervous because this person isn't pulling their weight. And you're trying to influence them to do work a little bit at night to be able to catch up so that you're not going to miss the deadline. Well, one of the things that you could ask is, hey, I know you're swamped. I know you have so much going on right now. And the last thing you need to hear is me, making this ask of you. And so first, I just want to acknowledge how swamped you are. The second thing is I'm really concerned about the deadline coming up. There's a lot of work on our plates. I think we're about a day or two behind. And right now we might not make it by that Friday deadline. What do you think would happen if we didn't make it? What would happen if we did not submit by that deadline? You're not telling this person, if we don't make this deadline, we're screwed. Our lives are ended. It's not you just jamming the consequences down that other person's throat. It's you asking a question to begin, again, controlling their thoughts here, controlling their focus. You're asking questions to get them to begin thinking about, what would happen? And now they're going to start thinking about the pain and the consequences. That's the push behind somebody. You have to influence them from behind first. And so it's through questions that you can begin to get the pain and the consequences. So once you have someone's pain and consequences, or you've at least gotten them thinking about the pain and consequences, then the next part is beginning to think through the pleasure and the benefits, which is the exact same. You ask questions about, well, what would happen if we made it on time, we did a phenomenal job? What do you think, Sam or Lucy or whoever the manager is, whatever, or the client or the other person, what would they think of us? Well, all of a sudden, all right, we made it on time, we did a phenomenal job. Well, they're probably going to love us. Maybe they give us another contract in the future. Maybe we get referral business because we did such an outstanding job that they're going to tell other people. So now and in terms of the pain and the pleasure and the benefits, there's short term and there's long term. So one of the things that is very common in sales that a lot of people don't talk about, or they do talk about, but a lot of people don't understand if they're not trained in it, is people habitually think and process in the short term. Very few people are naturally thinking long term consistently. And so sometimes what you have to do is ask questions about the long-term consequences and benefits. So, hey, I understand that right now this situation is looking pretty dire. What would happen if this wasn't solved for another 12 months? Where would the business be in 12 months? Oh my gosh, well, if we didn't do this in 12 months, well, and then what they're going to do is they're going to think through, well, in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, in 12, they're going to think through, all of a sudden, these things are compounding. The problems are stacking, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So think of it in terms of like a radar of, let's say this is 1 and this is 10. You want to turn their pain and the consequences from like a 3, where like, it's not so bad. You want to amplify this through asking questions. You want to ramp that up to a 10. It is a big problem. Maybe not now, but in the future, it's going to be huge. But the only way to do it is you can't tell them that. You have to ask questions to get them to think about it and them to come up with it. And then the exact same thing in the benefits is you want to take, maybe right now, things are decent, things are okay. Well, you want to ask the right questions to get them to think through the benefits to get them to a level 10 excitement. So you want a level 10 push behind them, and you want a level 10 pull forward in terms of pain and pleasure. So I hope all of this is making sense. And then the last part is you have to actually make the ask. So if you want someone to help you, if you want someone to invest in you, if you want to ask someone out on a date, if you want to, in a financial situation, if you want to win a deal over other investors, whatever the situation is if you don't make the ask, the other person is not going to put 2 and 2 together. They might in their head, but it doesn't mean that they're going to actually take action on it. So after you've gotten this person amped up, ready to go, excited about it, you have to make the ask. Get them to make a decision now. You don't want someone to just sit there and think about it. Because if someone just sits there and thinks about it, what they immediately do is human nature is going to bring them right back to pain, but not in a good way. They're going to go back to pain and think about the consequences of making this decision of being influenced by you, whether it's in a professional setting, a personal setting. What if I do go out on this date with this person and he's horrible or she's horrible? They're the worst date I've ever had. Oh my God, what a horrible night that would be. I'd lose money. I'd be embarrassed. It'd be uncomfortable. I'd be stuck in a restaurant for 2 hours with someone who sucks. Like they immediately begin thinking of the downside situation as opposed to them saying yes in the moment and then committing to it and then actually doing it. Or let's say it's a coworker and you don't make the ask, would you be willing to work on this for an extra 3 hours tonight to make sure that we can get this done by Friday? If you don't make that ask, that person is immediately going to go back to thinking about, oh God, if I have to do this for another 3 hours tonight, then I'm gonna miss, that game that I was gonna catch with my friends, or I'm not gonna be able to meet my friends out for dinner. Or immediately they begin thinking about the consequences of doing the thing, of the downside of the decision. You have to make the ask. So once you make the ask, and a lot of people don't know this, the average close, so in terms of if you're in sales or even going to be applying that, it's most people actually don't make a commitment until the 5th ask. That's nuts. But that's what it takes is consistency, because when we go through this initial structure with someone, we don't know all their concerns. We don't know what's going on in the back of their mind. And the only way to get that out is through asking questions, and we do the best that we can to understand what's going on in this person's head, but there's still going to be deep lodged concerns or things that we didn't even know to ask about. Maybe they have a medical situation at home. Maybe they don't actually have the financial resources, or maybe in terms of their value structure, there's something that's even more important that we don't know about. And so when you make this ask, just because someone says no doesn't mean no. It means that they have a concern in their head that you don't know about. And so the only way to get them to ask that is so let's say that you make an ask, and it could be a work scenario. So someone said, let's go back to that example of the 3 hours. So, hey, I know that you've got a lot going on. Would you be willing to put in the extra 3 hours tonight to be able to help me get this done so that you and I can both have this completed by the Friday deadline? I'd love to, I just can't. Got it. All right. So it sounds like there might be something else going on, or maybe you're concerned about something. What's concerning you? well, immediately they're going to have to come up with something. And really what you're doing is you're prying into what's going on. Why did they say no? If you don't understand why someone says no, you'll never be able to actually address the reason or kind of respond to the reason to change this no into a yes. So if we want to get a yes, we need no's. We have to get no's. We need people to say no to us. A lot of people are terrified of rejection because they consider this no as final, indefinite, never changing. And they're terrified of being told no, of asking and being rejected. Do not think of it as rejection. Think of it as information. We need to be told no to actually understand what we need to talk about in order to get to a yes, because we do not know what is going on in the other person's mind. We do not know their concerns. So I want to wrap this up by sharing that whether it's a professional setting or a personal setting, one, never, ever, ever assume that we know what is going on in someone else's head or what they value or what they care about. A lot of people have value structures that are so different from our own that we're trying to influence them and motivate them based on our own pain, pleasure, self-interest, and our own value structures. That will never work. People are all different because they all have different backgrounds, different experiences, different families, different situations. They all think and value things differently. So we have to capture their attention through self-interest. We have to be able to actually ask questions, listen, and understand to know and do our best to understand what is their current situation, what do they believe, what do they value. And once we believe that we have a pretty good understanding of their world, how they're seeing things and what's going on, then we begin to ask questions or we ask questions that are either going to help us understand what's currently going on, or we're going to ask questions that are proactively getting that person thinking about the pain and the consequences of not doing said thing. And then we're going to ask questions for the pleasure and the benefits. And then finally, as we make an ask, assume that they're probably going to say no, at least most of the time in a professional setting. That's okay. We need no's. We need them because what we're going to learn from them is what their concerns are and what's going on in the back of their head that we don't know about. That's going to come out, and then we can actually have a chance to address those concerns to be able to turn the no into a yes. So with that, this is an intro to sales, influence, negotiation. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this begins to open your eyes to, wow, I've been influencing or trying to influence people completely backwards. I've been trying to just give as many reasons and jam stuff down their mind. It's not about us giving people ideas. It's about us asking questions in a very specific order that is going to get them to be able to think in a way that motivates themselves. So with that, have an outstanding week. I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you next Monday.